Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we're going to check out a track from an act named Josh tells a story titled Light Train. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on Music Beat. Now, Josh tells a story apparently is quite popular on TikTok from what I understand. This is their track Light Train. I guess they tell stories on TikTok. I'm not sure. We're going to listen through this track today from start to finish and we're going to hear what we think. It also, I should note that it features Becks. So let's go. I mean, it sounds commercial grade off the bat. It's not just the vocal technique with the vibratos at that softer sort of level of delivery, but also the guitar, drums, bass being gently dragged in like that. It's phenomenal.
You had to see this coming. I bet you heard it from a mile away. There's a truth engine burning. Ooh, it's gonna light up your world. Light up your world.
So I suppose Becks is doing the call and response.
Can't get off the tracks, can't walk it back from the lies you wove behind our backs. You made this bed, my friend, now watch it fade to black. We're the light train, baby, rolling into your town. We're the light train, baby, what goes around comes around. We're the light train, baby, don't hide, you're gonna get found. We're the light train, baby. Ooh. And you know that we ain't slowing down.
I mean, like, it's really interesting with the way the guitar is being played, the intricacy of the drum grooves, the call and response, the way that Becks and Josh tells a story are interacting with each other vocally. There's a lot to be happy with here. I think as a listener, you'd be hard pressed to find things to complain about or be disinterested in at this point.
Truth is coming for you. She's got your ticket out the window, yeah. When you hear that whistle blowing, better get ready. Time to say goodbye to your world.
Nice variety in vocal flow, man.
There's no you can't pay, can't sweet talk your way out of this debt. Your ticket's punch friend and the ride ain't even started yet. No good to bide your time, cause we won't ever forget. No, 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 no. We're the light train, baby, rolling into your town. We're the light train, baby, what goes around comes around. We're the light train, baby, don't hide, you're gonna get found. Get found. We're the light train, baby. And you know that we ain't slowing down. No, no, no.
With like blues and soulsy kind of oral aesthetics going on here with the vibe from the keys, just the synths as well. What I like is that the synths come in on one side and then you've got the guitar or whatever on the other with a bit of chorus and with a bit of oscillation there. Yeah, no, I need to talk about this in the conclusion. I'll let the track play as much as I can without interrupting, but
Yeah. Oh.
it's just exciting, you know.
Down, 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 down. Lay it down, down, down. Lay it down. Get down, 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 buddy. Step down. You know that we ain't slowing down. Down, 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 down. Oh yeah. Lay it down, down, down. Lay it down. Get down, 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 buddy. Step down. You know that we ain't slowing down.
Okay, right. If I'm honest, I was kind of expecting one of the other instruments within the arrangement to come up a little bit for like a solo section. You probably could have stretched this out to like a 4-minute track, maybe having a little bit of lead riffage behind one of those hook lines before one of those interlude parts, but it's still good. I'm glad that we switched up the approach of the vocals here because I feel like we were familiar enough with the speed, the pace of the the words coming through within the stanzas, and almost having a bit of extra energy on the way out would have just kind of finished it off nicely.
Yeah, you know you're going down now. You lit it up, light it up. Now it's time to get it up.
Good job.
Yeah, you know you're going down now.
Interesting. All right. I think I got this one. I think we figured it out. Because this is the conclusion of my review of a track from an act named Josh Tells a Story, titled Light Train, featuring Becks. I think I've got this one. So I think that Light Train, not just because I've got the album art over here where you see the mask come off, but I assume this is maybe a track about someone. You're speaking about someone, and maybe they're in a position where they're trying to appear a certain way, but they've been doing things behind the mask, and they're basically untouchable up until the point where people have realized, hey, you know, we don't like what you're doing, and we're going to figure out how to create repercussions for you and consequences for your behavior. I think that's what this track is about. It's about people eventually coming to terms with the reality of facing what they've done and the damage. And so I think that's an interesting thing to tell a story about. I'm sure there'll be an audience for that. A lot of people rooting for the underdog, you know, and it does feel good when it happens. I think in addition to that, the vocals behind it are interesting. Clearly, we've got two really sensational vocalists here who are very comfortable within their vocal ranges. They notch nicely, with Becks being higher than Josh Tells a Story in their ranges, but also their head and chest voices are great. You know, Josh handled some falsettos, at least sometimes, if not head voice. They harmonized with each other, or they did cooler responses, which were great. I think Josh was handling a lot of it, but obviously, you know, having Becks as a foil there tonally and texturally was great too. And I don't think we needed more than that. I think it was not only a really effective way of showing their ability, but the melodies and harmonies that they sung served the track well, and there was a relative coolness. It was a very seamless, polished experience from them, where they sounded like they cared about what they were singing about, but it was more like a calm, collected, you know, admission to the person whose mask came off of just how kind of screwed they are. It was that kind of that the subject matter is heavy, but the way we sung it was like, yeah, no, this is just what's going to happen. You know, there was a sense of emotional equilibrium about it. Yeah, there was some vocal runs and a bit of spiciness occasionally, a little bit of tension. There was some of the chromatics as per the blues scale, but outside of that, I think that was just basically my summation of it. In that respect, I can understand how the vocals met with the story, and that was good. Outside of the vocals in the story, though, I think in addition, you have the track at 3.5 minutes, which was long enough. I say that not because I think it should have been shorter. I enjoyed my time with it, but it was more or less a fact of the matter that, especially with the first impression, having that 2 to 4 minute, being within that gap is really important, because that's the kind of length people typically expect a song to be. If it's too short, you risk not leaving out crucial context for the story you're trying to communicate to the listener. If it's longer than that, then you're basically having to add extra stuff to kind of spice it up, to kind of make it more exciting, because otherwise people are going to be like, oh, is this another verse? Is there going to be another solo section? I don't know if I want or need this in my life. So I think that was good. That was very good. Structure of it with the verses and choruses, but also the interludes, they were predominantly vocal focused. It was more about the tale that was being told here, which is fine. You know, when you've got two really skilled singers, you don't really need to have a lot more than that, especially when they can explore their scale shapes and they can bounce off each other like that. There was a great chemistry between the two of them. What I will say is I still maintain the fact that I think we could have made a little bit more use out of some of those accompanying instruments, such as the guitars or the keys and like the interlude last part, but I appreciated what we were doing with some of those backing instruments regardless. I think that the drums, for example, we had a nice sort of constant quarter note groove there with some accents, some 8th and 16ths on the hi-hats, which were kind of dope as we developed and went along there. And even if we didn't have a whole lot of crazy sort of like fills or anything like that, or diabolical kind of percussion, we mostly pocketed, and that's kind of what the track needed. We were trying to, again, keep the focus on the vocals. The bass line was nice and thick and full and raw, and I dug the gritty tone of it, but it was still relatively polished and It never stuck out like a sore thumb. It was supportive of the rest of the harmonies. The keys and the guitars, they came together and melded within each other and amalgamated really nicely. And I think that they're either bouncing off each other like at the start of each of the chorus takes, or they were layering and niching to create a kind of a two-note rough chorus or bass, like chord progression or bass line that looped really, really well. You know, it was satisfying every time it came to a close, and because of the variety within the vocal performance, it continued to keep it engaging. Though I will say there were some lead guitar parts with some interesting sort of vibrato there. There were other sort of fizzy synths that came in occasionally as well, which kind of made things a little bit more exciting. But again, the vocal, for the final time, the focal point was the vocals, and it was interesting enough that we didn't need to do more than that with the backings. That said, they provided a nice environment for the story to be told in. The motif itself sounded as cool and nonchalant and approachable as the vocal performance was, and I think that the tone of that with some of the extensions, avoiding really harsh chord progressions, too much complexity with the bass line to make it seem a bit more less. It wasn't a particularly energetic, it was very low key with the theme there because of a lack of movement between the bass notes and stuff like that. I think that slowness allowed the sinking feeling to go into the person listening to this who has the mask and threw it away or got it taken off him. So that makes sense. So well done to them for that. The theme did sound like their time was up, and that makes sense for the rest of the track. So moving on from that, we had the studio recording, mixing and mastering, and I think immediately when I got into the track I could basically tell that it was commercial grade. There was very, very little to really sort of like say anything was slightly negative about. The vocals were nice and crisp and clear in the mix. They were not just really nice filtering and EQing to the guitar, bass, and drums and keys and synths, etc. There were interesting tones to them. But we, you know, like I liked the lead guitar that was on the left side of the stereo filter, bow, that note. It was just a really interesting way for it to sound. You know, I've heard thousands of guitar riffs over my time as a reviewer, but having such complete minimalism there and the way that the music is written was still having that kind of catchy, memorable sound to individual specs of it is very important, and they got that here. But it was also the fact that we didn't have a whole lot of processing to the vocals beyond maybe a bit of reverb and compression and filtering just to kind of help them sit in their own niche within the mix, which I didn't need to worry much about because they're in different vocal ranges. But still, you know, that was well done. The drums, bass, guitars on the sides, and the keys and synths on the sides, that was nice and like stacked in the frequency spectrum without any resonant frequencies. Things were wide enough in stereo field to allow space for the vocals in the front, but then the vocals were still panned in interesting directions to kind of maybe like 50-50 sometimes, to kind of allow them to absorb more of it and just make a really huge sound and have that dynamic range between like the chorus sections, maybe some of the verse or interlude parts. And especially with the extra backing vocal takes, the choir takes in the last outro bit before things became really low-key and the drums bow out. You know, there was clear understanding of dynamic range, but also the power of layering, but also not pushing the loudness too much. So while it was nice and loud without pumping, it was nice and loud without pumping, so the bus compression and limiting was handled well, the music could breathe. And that's something I always appreciate, because as much as it's good to have a loud master, it can be a detriment if it goes that bit further and it sounds a bit claustrophobic within the mix. But this is my review of this track from an act named Josh Tells a Story, titled Light Train, featuring Becks, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please you could check out their various social medias and their TikTok, I suppose, and stay cool and stay safe, and please go and support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they had the hell more than ever thought of crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands Out.